Now, this video wasn't intended to go into all of the details of the passage. It was really just to illustrate how bad this argument really is. Hello, and welcome to the Beginning of Wisdom, Theology and Apologetics in the Sight of God. I'm Andrew Schumacher. You are watching The Cross and the Torah, examining Hebrew roots in the light of Scripture. This is part 6, Bad Arguments for Hebrew Roots. In this episode, we'll be dealing with the argument from Matthew 5:17 about Jesus abolishing or fulfilling the law. Please consider subscribing and ringing that bell to make sure you don't miss any installments in this ongoing series. Alright, today I'm going to be looking at a particularly bad argument for the Hebrew Roots movement and Torah Observance, and that is the argument from the definitions of abolish and fulfill, as Jesus says in Matthew 5:17. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about.
And let me tell you what Christians do with this. They pull this word out of this sentence. They make the word stand by itself. And then they try to give you a different definition that says that fulfill means to complete. And as a result of complete, it's done away with. Which, by the way, this is the definition of that. Done away with is part of the definition of the word abolish. Now, there's no question that in the context of this sentence, Yeshua is meaning something opposite of that, so that can't possibly be the definition of that word.
Yeshua is not saying, I did not come to destroy the law, but to end it. This is an absurd translation because it makes no sense in the context. It's no different than saying, I did not come to destroy the law, but to destroy it. Obviously, that is not what he is saying.
So then, what does it mean to abolish something? Now, what does it mean to fulfill something? Take note that Yeshua said he came to do one and not the other. They cannot therefore mean the same thing. However, we are informed by the church leaders that they basically mean the same thing and bring about the same result. Think about it. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, abolish means to do away with, to put an end to. And yet, what are we told that fulfill means? The definition given to us is the same. To do away with, put an end to, by way of completing.
Now, keep in mind what people are thinking when they're saying that, or what they're saying when they're thinking this. It says, think not that I come to abolish the law or the prophets, but I am not come to abolish, but to abolish. This is the verse, Matthew 5:17. This is what they're saying.
All right, so there is a common thread here. Basically, the idea of these teachers is that if fulfill means anything akin to end or complete or that connotation, then it just doesn't fit because abolish means that, and then it just means I didn't come to abolish but to abolish, or some equivalent argument. So in this video, we're going to examine that argument and see how it really just is a terrible argument. First, I want to be very clear about one thing that this video is not setting out to prove. This video isn't an argument against the Hebrew Roots movement itself. Those do exist in this series, but this is just an examination of one bad argument. So if you think, gosh, he didn't do anything to prove Torah observance wrong, well, yeah, that's why this episode is called Bad Arguments. So we're going to be looking at one particularly bad argument. Now, if you want to see a more in-depth examination of the text we're talking about, of Matthew 5:17, over at my blog at beginningwisdom.org, I have an entire series on Matthew 5, and specifically this section of Scripture, and looking at each verse and the context and everything. If you want to see something a little more in-depth, I did a series of articles there. Just go to that website and look for the Hebrew Roots section in the menu, and there's a lot of different things there, arguments and videos and things like that. But look for the section on Matthew 5, and and you'll see it right there. This particular video is just going to show all of the gaping holes in the argument that we're looking at today. So we're going to be looking at a few different ways that the Hebrew roots argument fails here. First of all, let's just go ahead and look up some definitions. This is from Strong's Concordance, just the definitions of the words we're looking at. So the word abolish in the Greek is kataluo. Here is the definition from Strong's of what this word can mean. It says to loosen down or disintegrate, or by implication to demolish, literally or figuratively, especially to halt for the night, to destroy, dissolve, actually to be a guest or lodge. It has a connotation there, but also to come to naught, overthrow, or throw down. Now for the word fulfill, in the Greek that is plerao, and plerao can mean to make replete, i.e. literally to cram, as in a net, to level up, or to figuratively furnish, or imbue, diffuse, influence, satisfy, execute, as in an office, to finish a period or task, verify or coincide with a prediction, etc., to accomplish, to complete, to end, to expire, fill, as in fill up, fulfill, to be or make full, to fully preach, to perfect, or to supply. Something these teachers very rarely acknowledge when teaching on this subject is that both of these words have connotations of ending. So, abolish means to end, as in to dissolve or destroy, whereas plerao can just literally mean to end or to finish or to complete. In fact, plerao is translated in such a way as it's used by Luke in Luke 7:1 and Acts 19:21. Luke 7:1 reads, after he had finished, plerao, all his statements in the hearing of the people, he entered into Capernaum. Then Acts 19:21 reads, now when these things were completed, that's plerao, Paul resolved in the Spirit to go to Jerusalem, passing through Macedonia and Achaia, saying, after I have been there, it is necessary for me to see Rome also. In both of these cases, the King James reads to end or to finish. It just literally means that in some cases. So not only do the definitions include these connotations of ending for plerao, but also, as we've seen, the scriptures actually translate it that way in certain cases. Now, another way that this word is used, especially in Matthew, is in regards to fulfilled prophecy. Matthew uses the word many, many times in this way. For example, Matthew 1:22 and 23 reads, now all this happened in order that what was spoken of by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, behold, the virgin will become pregnant and will give birth to a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel. Matthew 2:15 reads, and he was there until the death of Herod, in order that what was said by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. Matthew 8:16 and 17 reads, now when it was evening, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he expelled the spirits with a word, and he healed all those who were sick, in order that what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah would be fulfilled, who said, he himself took away our sicknesses and carried our diseases. For Matthew, by far the most common way of using this word fulfill is for fulfilled prophecy. And actually, when we look at Matthew 5:17 carefully, we see that Jesus isn't in this verse speaking of laws as in commandments, as in just to do the commands. It says, do not think I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have not come to destroy them, but to fulfill them. So Jesus doesn't just mention the law, he mentions the law and the prophets. This was a common way of referring to all the scriptures. It happens all over the New Testament. And so when Jesus says fulfill the law and the prophets, he's not specifically talking about laws as in commands. He's talking about all of the scriptures and referring to the law as in the first 5 books of Moses and the prophets, the remainder. At other times, it's all 3. There's 3 different ways that it's talked about: the law, the prophets, and the Psalms or the writings. But one shorthand way is to speak of it as the law and the prophets, and that's what he's doing here. So to use Matthew's general way of using this term fulfill is to say the way he's fulfilling prophecy, and Jesus is saying, I have come to fulfill everything that's said about me in all of the scriptures. And if you think about it, trying to say fulfill is just something like to do gives it and that we should consider these things the same way that Jesus considered them. It's really very simplistic. Any scriptures, any of these passages that we looked at where Jesus fulfilled the prophecy, we no longer approach that scripture the same way. Now, Jesus certainly didn't abolish or destroy those passages, those prophecies about himself. They are still scripture, they are still profitable, but we don't approach them the same way now as those believers before Jesus came approached them. Before, they approached them as promises to be fulfilled in the future. They are promises made. For us, they're promises kept. We look at them and we say, Jesus fulfilled this. Jesus kept this scripture, this prophecy of his coming, as in when he healed the people and all these other examples. So we don't approach those scriptures the same way today as the Jews before Jesus approached them. Rather, we look at them as something that Jesus accomplished, and it's complete now. We don't expect Jesus or anyone else to come along and continue to fulfill messianic prophecies. So that helps us to see how to approach anything Jesus said he fulfilled. Now, one thing I didn't play for you in those clips was that Hebrew roots teachers will often try to disprove any idea of ending for fulfill by going to other passages and other scriptures that use the term that wouldn't have that meaning. And certainly there are lots of times when the word is used where it doesn't have that meaning. But this is really just a distraction from the main issue. If a teacher needs to go all over to other different contexts in order to try to prove what they think it means in a given context, that is really suspect. We should really look at the passage itself and try to understand what it means. We can know from this passage, if we look at Matthew's general usage, that gives us some idea, but we should never use that all by itself to tell us, well, definitely it must mean this. If Jesus had said something like, I don't think that I came to destroy all the commandments specifically, instead of talking about the law and the prophets, and that I didn't come to destroy them, but to do them, but to fulfill them by obeying them. If he was more specific in that way, well, then we would be justified in thinking that the way he meant fulfill was just to do what was being commanded. But that isn't what Jesus said. Matthew's general usage of fulfilling prophecy combined with Jesus' usage of referring to all the scriptures gives us evidence that we should not go with the idea that it's just to do what the law says. So when we look at the actual definitions of the actual words Jesus used in this statement, we see that kataluo, or abolish, means to end something in a sense. It doesn't literally mean to end. It means to destroy, to dissolve, to overthrow. Jesus is talking about coming against the Old Testament scriptures. And he's saying he did not come to do that, to overthrow everything that's been written, but rather to plerao, to fulfill, which does often mean to end, but it means to end by completing its purpose, to finish, to bring something to its intended completion, or to make it perfect, to make it full. So both of these words carry connotations of ending. And as Christians have always said, Jesus didn't come to destroy or come against the law. Rather, he came to fulfill all the scriptures. He came to fulfill what was said about him. And that's what the passage means. So we've seen three ways in which the Hebrew roots argument fails here. Number one, it just fails to acknowledge the real definitions of these words in the Greek. It is not the English where fulfill means to end. It's the Greek where plerao often does mean to end. So the definition of the words is not being acknowledged. Number two, the usage in Scripture includes to end for fulfill, as we saw in Luke 7:1 and Acts 19:21. And also, we've seen that the word, as it pertains to prophecy, which is included when Jesus said the prophets, also means that it comes to its completion, and we now approach those scriptures differently. We learn from them, but we don't look at them the same way that the Jews before the fulfillment looked at them. What Jesus is doing here is not picking one word for its meaning of to end and the other word for some other meaning. Rather, he chose two words that both mean to bring something to an end, and is bringing out the contrast between those two words. One is about something coming against something to overthrow it. The other is working in harmony with something to bring it to its intended conclusion. So now we see the argument that if you think fulfill means to, in any way to complete or to end, you just mean the same thing as abolish. We see that argument for what it is. It's a distraction. It's a red herring. It's really a terrible argument. And now you know why. Now you understand the Greek and why that just doesn't fit what Jesus was talking about. Now, this video wasn't intended to go into all of the details of the passage. It was really just to illustrate how bad this argument really is. If someone comes along and tells you, well, if you think fulfill means to end, then you just really mean abolish, and Jesus said he didn't come to abolish, just ask that person what they do with Luke 7:1 and Acts 19:21, and say, really? Fulfill really can't mean that? Are you sure Jesus isn't bringing out a different contrast between these words? See what they do with that. I hope this video has been helpful for you. Go ahead, if it has, and click that subscribe button, and don't miss an episode, because this will be an ongoing series, and I'm looking forward to the next one.